Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da da da. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do do do. May we listen for that sweet spot with all our heart.
Welcome to Our New Voice 47 edition. We are sitting here with Tomas. This is your host, NasT Rex. Tomas is a great friend, a brother, a comrade in the struggle towards a more loving world. Welcome to the space, Tomas.
Thank you, NasT Rex, for having me. It's a blessing.
So as I spoke with you a little bit, the sort of meaning of this project is, to put it succinctly, how we can use our new voices and our experiences to create a more harmonious world, a more balanced world. So in that vein, I think the concept of polarity is very important. And if there was a moment or a set of moments, or however you want to interpret the question, how did you first realize you were, quote unquote, a man or a boy or one side of the polarity?
Yeah, so I've been reflecting on this question a decent bit recently, just kind of also in general with my own moment of healing that I'm in. And I think that it's tough to pinpoint. I think that we do live in a world, in a society that is so stratified by gender, that we just become gendered at some point. But one instance I think that was definitely very impactful was, as a child, probably around third, fourth, fifth grade, when sports started to become segregated by genitalia. And and it was normal, it was normal, and it was justified by adults. And it's something that recently has certainly been on my mind, because I think it's actually a dangerous split. It's a split that happens so early that we then allow development to happen in different ways. And so, yeah, I think that was definitely a pinpointing moment. And then, of course, as time went on, it became stronger. I think once I got into the context of school, like high school, that 7th to 12th school, it was more amplified. And then, the ideas of dating were pretty heavy into my mind, and what that meant, and pursuits of sex as a masculine trait, and certain behaviors as not being masculine, that I tried to really erase from myself. Like even something, for instance, back in 7th and 8th grade, I was certainly friendly with many women, and was constantly called, the gay best friend, irrelevant to the fact that, that's not my sexual orientation. It was just simply the behaviors of niceness and friendliness and companionship with no means of pursuit of sex that was looked at as these quote unquote gay traits that are, I think very paralleled with not being masculine. And then as time continued, it just got further and further. And then I had a big desire to be tougher, to be, or at least to be perceived as tougher. Whether or not I was ever actually tough is open for debate. And that's why I think I was so drawn to rugby after high school, was because it was the perception of toughness, you know what I mean? And I was actually really spent some time reflecting on this last night, and how, and I enjoyed the sport. I think it was fun. I think it was a good moment. But what I really liked about the sport was when people knew I played it, when people knew that I played rugby, because it was just, I had this idea that it was so, masculine to be out there and, hitting each other and toughness and drinking afterwards and that whole, the whole nature of the game.
So that's interesting how you say, you've always been into sports, but then at times sort of these connotations push you into sports or choices that you may not otherwise have chose. So in that same way, like, what have been sort of the things is there things that you might not otherwise have done if it wasn't for these ideas of what it is to be a man, or, that you might not otherwise have done? And then are there things on the other side that, felt good and felt true internally to be doing, like that internal balance?
That's a complex question. Because once action is completed, it's hard to, necessarily say if we would or wouldn't have done it, because we've done it. Definitely think that I would have had different relationships with myself, with others, and with substance. Actually, I believe that's been a really, really heavy reflection of mine over the past months, as I've been, working on getting sober, as I've been working on healing this element of myself. And I recently listened to an audiobook that was really fantastic, or a part of an audiobook from Brene Brown, where she talks about shame versus guilt, and how shame can lead to addictive tendencies, or just addiction in general. And I was, listening to this point, and I was wondering within myself, what levels of shame I may have had over the years that I never quite addressed, because I didn't feel like I was truly embodying this concept of being a man, or being masculine, or however we want to frame it. And like kind of had these desires to be more fluid, but couldn't really embrace them, or didn't feel confident enough to embrace them. And so, that led me to, this world of drinking and smoking, to kind of just numb myself and accept this reality, and this kind of just this role that I felt that I needed to complete. And then just this kind of outward showing, this outward showing through vulgarity, through some level of like, homophobia, through just kind of these practices that it's like almost a group consciousness of masculinity that that I would believe I wouldn't have necessarily participated in had I not felt the pressures to assimilate, so to say, to adapt. I definitely think that's a big component of this all, is that there are concepts of being a man or masculinity that are really shown to us, that are really pushed onto us in such a binary way, that like, where maybe I enjoy, or like don't necessarily question my being like a male, but maybe I do have a view that like life is more fluid, than that. And I just wasn't quite able to explore that even, in a safe and comfortable way because of just the general feeling from others, just kind of, and like, it's not to blame others or to take away things from myself. It's just to kind of highlight that a lot of this happens in a social setting. A lot of this gendering happens in such a social setting and from such a young age that it's hard to separate, what was our behavior versus what was imposed behavior. So yeah, that might not have quite answered your question, but
I think that's a really deep point, what you're bringing up. I mean, first and foremost, I appreciate the use of the word assimilation because, well, I don't appreciate it, but I think it's on point because it goes to talk about the colonization of our minds and the colonization of our behavior, the colonization of the way we police others, how these are systems upheld by individuals, humans, just like us, but it represents a set of ideals that is so much deeper, stronger, and more insidious than each and every one of us. And then also, it's a really deep point about the way in which that disharmony created within can lead to addiction and, being people that essentially that we're not, being pushed and pressured to be things that we're not, to appease society or those around us, can lead down to these unhealthy paths and relationships with substances and with addiction. And then going back to what you were saying about how early it started as children. I don't quite remember what age, but within sports already separating by genitalia before we even have very developed concepts of what quote unquote masculine and feminine are. How detrimental that can be. That can be the beginning steps of an addiction. And if more people were able to unpack these things, would adults still be, pushing 4, 5, 6-year-olds down the path of addiction that early? Is that something we really want to be, choosing? So another question, we've talked about it a little bit, but, how it was then instilled as a young person, and then how you what were some of the steps or the work that you've had to carry out to understand it for yourself? And what have been some of those more liberating moments when you're like, oh shit, I am in harmony right now. I feel like I'm making choices that are creating more harmony within myself, that are pushing me further away from addiction and addictive tendencies and closer towards being in harmonious balance with my own self.
Yeah, so I mean the pushing and the stratifying, I think that it was so just multidimensional, it's kind of just all around us. And maybe people can argue that some of these things are necessary or natural, like as we enter more of like the pubescent years and bodies do develop in different ways and go through different changes. There just is such an emphasis on like boys and girls, and such an emphasis on like this split. And I think definitely there was such an element of sexualizing as well, and where exactly that stems from, I'm not so sure either. But from 5th grade, the age of 10 years old, I had like a girlfriend, and that was also definitely a concept that I didn't just randomly develop. It was kind of the general ways that we view ourselves, that we're viewed by others as well, by simple interactions. And it's like, oh, he's such a ladies' man, or oh, she's so into it. It's like these simple things. But I think it was just so holistic. It's hard to really separate, how it was instilled further and further. And I think that I definitely embraced it, or tried to embrace it. I like had a big desire to like be a man without necessarily knowing what that even meant. And so as time's gone on, it's been difficult, but it's also been beautiful, and it's been pretty natural to kind of start this process of moving away. I think that it's been, again, like the social element's been really important, like having a squad, having the 47 tribe who are just as a collective pushing their minds, pushing our minds in different directions, and trying to do a lot of this difficult healing work, this decolonizing work, and kind of having that space was very important. And I began, simple processes. Like one thing that was really big for me, and it's not evident at the moment, but growing my hair out, having long hair, which I don't think is inherently a feminine or masculine thing, but growing long hair, and then having time, needing to dedicate more time to taking care of it, learning to try to start taking care of my skin, which has been a really difficult process that, I think I associate like masculinity with like, I don't need to care about these types of things. I can just be rough and rugged, and that's ideal. And so that was a big one. And then starting to wear earrings again was also a nice one. Like I had my ear pierced from elementary school, actually, which I think might kind of show back to that, like kind of pushing, that internal desire to push bounds. And then I started to wear earrings again, probably 2018, 2017 even, and enjoyed it, really enjoyed it, and enjoyed more dangly ones with a more flair to them, like to kind of just express myself through
just be yourself, dude.
Exactly. And it's like, it's almost funky sometimes to explain. Like I remember I was at a gathering one time that wasn't the same type of energy as like a 47 tribe gathering, and some a woman asked me, why I had like this dangly lion earring that I loved, and I like had my like long hair out, and she's like, why do you wear earrings? And I didn't have a good answer besides I just like to, you know what I mean? Like, Like, why do I have to have a justification?
Didn't need one.
Didn't need one, and they're things that I don't view as, it's not as though like I view wearing earrings as like intrinsically feminine, it's like, if anything, I think it's part of my power, you know what I mean? Having a nose ring, like I don't think that necessarily means I'm trying to be, or like get away from being a man. I think it's just, I'm trying to be myself, I'm just trying to really embrace my own power.
And I think that comes into the illusion, it starts to lift the veil on some of these illusionary concepts of what these just boxes are. And then defining them for ourselves helps to create the harmony that we're actually after. So like on a more emotional level, if you could talk a little bit about what has expressing yourself more fully and completely without regard for how society or how people are going to perceive you, how has that had effect on you, emotionally? And if you want to delve into how it's affected your relationship with substances as well, just embracing yourself more fully.
Yeah, so it's not been linear. I think that's also important. I think all these processes of healing are not linear, and that's a really important pre-note to put in. Particularly for anybody who might listen to this who is in a stage, an earlier stage of their own healing journey. It can sometimes be off-putting when like as you want to start, making this journey towards like a destination that will be liberating. It's really hard. The process can be really, really hard and can cause a lot of things to come up. But that's just part of the journey. And so don't, I just want to throw that out there for anybody who might be listening. On a deeper level, it's really just allowed me to embrace myself so much more fully, to really start cultivating this self-love. It's something that has maybe become a little bit of a catchphrase recently in popular culture. But like, what does it really mean to like love yourself? And for me, it's been hard. It hasn't been like I just woke up and like loved everything about myself. There's plenty of things that I've for a long time been like, oh, I really wish I didn't have this. But the more and more that I don't resist my being, and my existence and my desires on a certain level, the more that I'm able to just say, this is who I am, and even if this who I am now is different than who I was and who I may be, I can say this is who I am, right now, and this is someone that I really do love.
So you woke up like this?
Yeah, kind of, kind of. Didn't even comb my hair this morning. Just look, I might even have some in my hair.
Oh, you're such a man.
I know, right? And yeah, I think it's also been important for me to, and this has been another hard one, to fully accept others, and I think there's been a lot of points in my life where I've been more judgmental towards others, or like kind of like projecting my own insecurities onto others who are free beings, who like really embrace things, and I'm still like kind of in my conditionings, and the more and more that I'm able to break free of these paradigms and this binary view of life, the more I'm able to just like really see others as also as just beings, as just love, and that's an important thing as well, because we are so we're so interconnected. We're told to be individuals and individualistic and all these things, but that's just a lie. It's a Babylonian lie, and the more that we're able to really cultivate group love and group acceptance and group support, the freer that we become.
Yes.
So again, I think just kind of back to that like tribal elements of things, and I think that's also kind of to go a little bit full circle. I think that's why, at least we'll just use I statements, why I really fell into this cycle of socialization, because we're social beings. When you're like in a group setting, like the high school setting where there's hundreds of kids around, and being wearing tie-dye shirts, or like having like longer hair, or like whatever else might get you bullied, well, you're probably going to avoid that, and you're probably going to try to just kind of assimilate yourself into a way where like you're going to be part of the pack, where you can either be non-seen, or even try to be like a leader of that pack. And so then as you move forward and you find people who are on the same wave and on the same journey of healing, it's so much easier to liberate yourself.
Definitely. I think it's a really good point, what you bring up about sort of thinking back to these times and these people that you were, where you may have sort of assimilated yourself to that position that was a little bit more judgmental of more free beings to make a more sense of security within our own uncertainty of who we truly are and what brings us into balance. Has there been any practices that enable you to get in touch with that true voice within you? Because just for instance, I think on this journey, I've seen a lot of us, and I've gone down the rabbit hole within myself where we start unlearning. We realize that a lot of these first voices that pop into our head are lies, or they're undesirable, or they're oppressive for ourselves or others. And we want to change that. We want to be more authentic to ourselves. And so sometimes we can intellectually try to understand that truth. We can seek out more radical ways of being, more radical sets of knowledge, and in a certain way assimilate ourselves to that. And I think for me, I've found more meaning in just moving from the heart. Instead of trying to find a set of values, going to look things up and investigate and find which voice I want to download as if it was a computer program, just listening to my heart. That's been what brings me more meaning. And I think I found a few different practices that help me listen to my heart. So if you could talk about just any practices that you found meaning in that really help you get in touch with that core voice.
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. That's definitely one that is on the forefront of my mind that I would say I still struggle with and haven't quite maybe gotten to the point of constant practice that I'd like to be at, but that's okay. So I think the body is such an important part to talk about, and like it's true, like we can intellectualize a lot of these things, and maybe I've been able to do that. But then it's like the body also has it's a memory of its own, and these patterns that it really falls into. And so, for instance, I really got into weightlifting at some point. I really liked it a lot, like just picking up heavy things and just trying to enhance my physique. That was the goal, to be bigger, to be stronger. To be more masculine, right? That was the whole goal. And over time, I've definitely moved away from that. Not that it's wrong. If anybody, wants to do it, I think they can. There's men and women that do it. It's fine. But for me, it's been really important to kind of take a step away from that. And, things such as, movement practices like yoga are, not to be cliche, but are really helpful in terms of embracing my entire being, and particularly when done in a setting with an instructor who just is able to guide you and able to guide you mentally, spiritually, and physically. I found it to just be tremendously beneficial. And then other movement practices as well, like trying to just dance, by myself. It sounds silly, and maybe I'm not the greatest dancer in the world, but that's also part of that self-consciousness that has been instilled through this socialization.
The way
we're
we
like
release ourselves.
It's crazy. It's so crazy. These like restrictions that we put on ourselves, these chains that we put on ourselves for no real reason, except for thinking that it'll help us fit in better, help us feel better, whatever that might be. But it just causes so much damage, so much damage.
I think these systemic issues and the assimilation, it's powerful and it's daunting, but at the same time, it's encouraging in the fact that it relies on our complicity to accomplish its task. And when we begin to take back our agency and our complicity in what we have been buying into, it loses its power and we're able to step into our own.
No, absolutely. I think that's a great point as well, is that like we still have the power to take ourselves back at any moment, you know. And I think to touch on something that we've alluded to a little bit, you know, this relationship with substance and with abuse of substance and addiction. It's a really serious issue that a lot of people, a lot of our family members, a lot of our loved ones deal with, you know, and it's not accidental, you know, it's not accidental. It happens, I think, a lot from the restrictions of society, the pressures, the just the entire way of life that we're assimilated into. But, you know, in my own journey, and you know, I have just over half a year of sobriety at this point.
Hey,
I've really found that it's possible to heal oneself at any point. You know, I've seen people who are very young, who have, you know, just maybe who have gone through their own journey and have gotten sober, and I've seen people who are very old who have lived a life of serious addiction and have still been able to get sober. And I think the common theme I've seen throughout is the liberation, right? The liberation that people have felt, the spiritual healing that happens, and just the way that you begin to, or I've begun to see people really embrace themselves fully as beings, you know, and of course everybody's journey is different, but for some people it's been really, really incredible. And for myself, you know, I just feel like at this point, and the journey's so long, and you know, it's a day at a time kind of thing. That's the nature of the disease. But I just feel like at this point, as I'm shaking these restrictions off of myself, that there's no limit to where my being can go, you know, and that has to do with, you know, that's everything, you know, that's but particularly like within the mental spiritual realm, you know, and it's not to pretend like I'm some type of, you know, guru or holy power, but it's just like our existence is much more powerful than we have ever been told. And I've been starting to realize that more and more. And the more we shake, you know, the more we're able to shake off restrictions, the freer and freer we become. And it's difficult, but it's really beautiful.
yeah, I hear you saying like, you know, just sort of the universal nature of addiction is sort of what makes the universal nature of self-realization a cure for addiction. And the fact that, you know, we go to these unhealthy relationships, whether it be with people, substances, food, any of these escapism mentalities, we go to this self-medication from a universal place, not from the same reasons, not from the same past, you know, but for these universal concepts. And then we're able to sort of, I think, make steps towards healing, doing that healing work in universal ways, from really addressing and getting to the root of these problems. What are, if you could sort of sum it up, what are some of your core values that you hold, you know, really deeply within yourself? You just talked a little bit about how much meaning and how much power you've been finding in yourself by shaking things off. And I think we share a great teacher and friend, young Pueblo. He grew up right down the street from both of us. And, you know, he talks about it in mental knots, you know, untying these mental knots. And allowing the ego to dissipate, almost like a cloud that surrounds our consciousness. And it allows those clouds to dissipate. So just like you spoke of sort of shedding yourself and stepping into your power in those ways, shedding the things that we don't want to accept or the things that we've come to accept in our conditionings. What are some of the core values that have been emerging in that process of unlearning that have really brought that state of inner harmony to you?
Wow. That's definitely a developing question, or a developing answer to that question. I would say one that's a really big one that I've been working on tremendously is that self-love is the foundation to all love. And I'm probably more guilty of this than anybody else I could think of, but it's very common for us to want to love others, to want to really at least say that we love others without necessarily having cultivated a true love for our own existence. And there's a line that I've seen swirling around the internet that says that there's an African proverb that says, don't trust what is it? Don't trust somebody without a shirt to say that they'll clothe you. Something like that, and I think it's really relatable in the sense that, like, if I can't love myself and I'm with myself all the time, every single moment of every single day, how could I love another? Because love is about no conditions. It's about embracing the flaws with the perceived perfections. Just embracing it all, understanding that we're beings, we're very imperfect beings. So that's a really big one. One that I've really been adopting from my recovery program is that life is about progress, right? It's not about perfection. And I think that's really also true with this journey of unlearning and decolonizing and changing paradigms. Like I may get caught in habits sometimes that I would want to not be caught in, and that's okay, because it's part of the journey. But I'm able to recognize them better and hopefully correct as time moves forward. So it's really about that, that progress. Man, core values. That's a hard one. I think it's one that I fear a little bit, actually, and that's a big thing that I've been trying to also understand myself is that I have a lot of fear, I have a lot of fear that I mask in a lot of ways. And for instance, recently I had to write something that would be published, just like a little blurb about myself. And it took me a while because it's the permanence, right? The permanence of something written. And it's fear. It's a lot of fear, and fear drives a lot of my undesirable behaviors. So yeah, I think that question of core values is one that I'm going to actually table. I would love to come back one day and answer it again.
Yeah, I think you did a good job. For me, I remember one time when I was doing a little meditation, and I was going through a lot of things that I'm really grateful for. And I got to myself, and I just focused my focus on myself. I focused all my loving awareness on myself. And I felt this presence come into the room, and I realized it was myself. It was myself loving myself. And I think that's one of the many ways that self-love can look like. This is not a formula. And it's not to say, now I love myself. Now it's all done. The work is done. It's never done. But that practice in and of itself was such an amazing feeling that I never realized I could focus my loving attention on myself and almost feel this additional presence around me, which is myself. It was sort of a trippy moment, to be honest. Something that's been really meaningful for me recently has been my relationship with nature. So I wanted to ask you, how has your relationship with nature supported you? Or I assume yeah, how has it supported you?
Yeah, no, that's a really important question. And I think that, well, to start off more on the hippie end of the question, a relationship with nature is a relationship with ourselves.
Yeah.
And the more that we ignore that, the more tension that we cause within ourselves. And it's difficult, I think that our human centeredness likes to try to bring us away from that, but like we are natural beings and we have natural tendencies. And like, I think, for instance, one that always amuses me is our relationship with the moon, and our relationship with just these cycles and this lunar cycle. And like, the more I become aware of it, like the more liberating it has been. And it's like, it's almost so obvious that it should impact us, yet it's like we want to resist it. We want to like pretend like it wouldn't, like that we're just greater than this, in this universe. And then to get into a little bit more, some practical examples, I think that my relationship with nature has been evolving over time. When I spent some time in Chile, I was doing a lot of farm labor, like a lot of the most farm labor I ever did in my life. And I definitely associated it with like these more brute trends. I loved the idea of like being a brute cowboy, cutting into forests and like, not destroying them, kind of healing them almost, but like through brute force. But what I really quickly realized is that the more brutal I was, the more like I tried to just use force, the more resistance I received. And so there's this type of tree down in that area called coliwe. It looks very similar to bamboo, but the difference is that it's actually, where bamboo is hollow, this is solid and has an incredible elasticity. And it grows really tall, like it's almost like a weed. It grows thick, and like they're only like that big, but it grows all over the place and thick through the woods. And so we were trying to get rid of a lot of these. And when hit correctly, they cut pretty easily. But I would kind of go in with the axe, and I would go in guns blaze and swinging, and these coliwe would smack me. They would smack me all the time. Like I would hit it as hard as I could, and it would just rebound. And like I'm telling you, like I got like it drew blood from me multiple times. And then I kind of started to realize in that journey that like the more I went in with intention and tranquility, the easier my time was, and the more that I went in with soft movements and intentional movements, the easier the entire process was. And of course it wasn't perfect. There's some days that I was fired up and would go in and pay the price. But as I've now moved, over the last last few years, nature is the greatest healer. Like, I'm so fortunate to live near the Arboretum, and I walk there almost every single day, and I try to walk there barefoot as often as possible because it grounds me. It connects me. It reminds me that that we are nature, that we are all of this. And as I've been trying to get more into home gardening, I've realized that it's more about delicate behaviors rather than these brute behaviors. And I still like the brute behavior sometimes. Sometimes I like to get dirty and move things and toss around stuff, and that's okay. That's okay. But then I also like to really gently take care of flowers, or like weed out areas, or be gentle with bugs. That might seem silly, but whereas before I was more ready to kill animals, I think now I want to try to preserve life at all levels. And that simple action has actually brought me a lot more tranquility. So it's an evolving relationship. It's a very evolving relationship, but I definitely know that the more I am returning to my roots, to our roots, the healthier I am. And it might seem like a paradox almost, but like it's really where we're meant to be, and we've been told for so long that that it's like that progress is these cities and these things like this, and they have their purpose, but we're beings, we're natural beings, and the more that we are in our natural habitat, the better we are. And I think on that same note, actually, another point I want to touch on, and not in the holier than thou way whatsoever, but is diet. And I think that this has actually been a really important part of my own journey recently, whereas I've recently been cutting out animal products from my diet. And I definitely think that this is something that has to do with, or that's related to, our perceptions of gender and gendered behaviors, and like masculinity in particular. Not that it's exclusively that, but I for so long was a give me a steak kind of guy. I want to eat meat all the time, meat, and thinking that was the key to being big and strong and tough and all these things. And then over the past few months, I haven't eaten meat in many months, and I feel it's not perfect. Again, I still have a lot to work on in my diet and my health in general, but it feels a lot better. It feels great when I eat fruit. It brings me a happiness. It brings me a joy. Like in a really just a different type of joy. Like this kind of joy where I feel like I'm recharging and just re-energized and really ready to go do things. And so I think that we have to, or I've been really trying to look at myself as a whole being, as a complete being that has many components to it, that all have to be valued and addressed, and the more attention we put to these different things, the better we'll be, and the better that we are, the better that we will be, because that's another really important part of nature that I was sort of talking about earlier, but that we're very connected beings, and I think it's a big question that comes up, in these healing journeys. And it actually came up last night in a discussion I was having in 12-step meeting is, why do you want to do the healing? Why do you want to be sober? For instance, that was a specific question that came yesterday. And there's a personal element to it, right? Like where I think my life, my quality of life will be better. But then there's a collective question to it as well, where our quality of life will be better, where through my changing of a habit or healing of a trauma or a practice can have a tremendous ripple that will really go through not only maybe my family, but my friends, my loved ones, my greater community. It can have an impact on people who I've never met before. And I experienced that firsthand last night when a person was telling their story, their recovery story, and said some things that really touched my soul, and I may never experience, hopefully I'll never experience what they experienced, but by them sharing and them doing the hard work of healing, they impacted me, and they can help me potentially avoid some of those same issues. So yeah, I think relationship with nature is huge. It's huge both in the sense of its importance, but also in the sense of its complexity and its branches. Like there's so many things, so many parts of it, and none should be understated as being important, because yeah, I think that's, at least for me personally, that's also part of this healing journey is returning. It's a return trip back to where we came from and where we've kind of moved away from over however many generations under the mask of progress, but has really been much more than that. Has had so many layers to it. So
Definitely.
Yeah.
I really liked what you were saying about the brute force versus the gentleness of working with the land, and then coming into a state of honoring the whole spectrum, as opposed to just viewing it as this, strong man or strong embodiment, brute force type of thing. And I think that's really key, is this process of not switching to the other polar opposite and then being like, well, actually, this is the good one and the other one's the bad one. Because we're still in that binary mentality, and embracing the entire spectrum that sometimes nature is that brute force. And then other times it's the most delicate thing you've ever felt. And definitely working with nature, I can resonate with that point, that sometimes one is necessary and sometimes the other is necessary. I can definitely also affirm that when you go to nature with a sense of, oh yeah, I'm gonna force you to do something, yeah, you're probably gonna catch a thorn to the face, or you're probably gonna get smacked by a tree. So nature is a beautiful teacher, an amazing teacher. I also enjoy what you're saying about the moon. And I think that kind of circles back. It sort of sums up what we've spoke about throughout this entire thing, because Luna is the divine feminine archetype. And as you see society evolve into a more patriarchal system, into a more system that honors brute force and doesn't honor the divine feminine elements within all of us. And it's important that it is definitely suppressing the divine feminine dominant beings. But we are all divine feminine beings. All of us have that element within us, whether it's more dominant or less dominant. And so it's suppressing that within all of us. And as we've evolved, I hate to use the word we when we say that, but I guess it is we, I didn't choose to move towards a more patriarchal society, but here we are, and it's our collective issue. So I guess we got to solve it together. And the suppression of the moon, many indigenous tribes work with a 28-day cycle, worked with the lunar calendar. And now we got the Gregorian calendar. Now, I don't know if you know Gregory or who knows Gregory, but I don't know this man, Gregory. And I don't know why we all abide by this ambiguous 31, 30-day, 28-day. That's madness to me. And, it's suppressing the divine feminine aspect. The moon is the calendar right there. It tells us where we at. But instead, we got to look to the boxes to tell us what day it is and when is tax day. Calendar comes from the Roman word calend, which is a journal of keeping track of debts. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want to live my life in a cycle of perpetual debt. I want to make a new way of honoring the cycles, natural in nature, that highlight the aspects of abundance. Not highlight how much I owe to this person and how much money are we going to allocate to war. No, thank you. So it's amazing how far we've gotten from that state of harmony, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just on so many levels, and the tension that we unnecessarily create in ourselves, it's really phenomenal. And I think kind of, and this might be a little bit off kilt, but I think it's definitely relevant, is especially in this conversation of masculinity and femininity and just the systems we live in. It's like women, for instance, right? They have a menstrual cycle every month, and as men, it tends to be this thing that we reject as not a conversation point, not an acceptable, it's just this thing that happens over here, and it's crazy because it is, it's just this continuous cycle, right? This very natural cycle that happens, and that is the epicenter of life. It's the epicenter of life that happens all the time, all around us, yet it's cast to the side as this, disgusting thing that we should never, talk about. And it's really has definitely recently been something that's just on my mind of why? How is that the way that we approach, life, and the way that we almost view it as a weakness. It's what? How is creating life a weakness?
So embrace the menstrual cycles. I'm all about it. I had to go through this eternal crack with one of my great sisters, and we lived together. And she had a diva cup, and she would keep jars of her blood around the house, her period blood. So quickly, I had to basically evolve to being very comfortable with the menstrual cycle. So I deeply appreciate her perpetuation of my growth in that area and my embracing of her being herself and embracing of that divine feminine. Besides embracing menstrual cycles, is there anything else that you would want to leave us with of, coming back into that inner state of harmony?
Yeah, I think if we're kind of at that point of wrapping up, a good point that I would like to leave people with is is that, well, first of all, like I said earlier, you know, these journeys are non-linear. You know, life is non-linear. That's another myth that we're sold, is that like life exists in this like linear pattern, and then we're just walking, you know, into the wherever. You know, life is constant spirals back and forth, and that, at least for me, has definitely been really a big part of my growth, is like where sometimes I'll feel like I'm so forward and like, you know, on the edge of breakthroughs, and then sometimes you're like more reduced back, and like you have to go over things again, and things challenge you, and that's okay. You know, I really say that to anybody who's listening who may be resistant to some of these ideas. Like, it's okay to resist to a degree. You know, we have a lot of internalized beliefs, a lot of feeling. We have a lot of attachment to the way that we've seen life play out, the way that we've been raised. You know, the way that we understand the world. And so, I don't think there's a need to shame yourself if you hold certain views, and I also don't think that there's a need to like you were alluding to, NasT, is that like there's no need to jump to the other side. And I think you know, in my own learning process, and it was part of my own journey, I think that there's a moment when I maybe leaned really far into the other side, and I was like, you know, feminine everything. And then it's like, well, that's also not balanced. So, you know, and I think the understanding, for instance, of a yin and a yang are very important, because it really is about us finding what's the balance that works for us, you know. And I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with being masculine, so long as you have a healthy masculinity, you know. And there's obviously nothing wrong with being feminine either. And finding that balance that really works for you, it's going to take time, it's going to take practice, it's going to take struggle. But I think that it's part of our journey towards liberation. And so, you know, I'm just really honored and blessed to have been asked to even speak here. You know, I think that my answers are all to be viewed as truly imperfect, as truly just musings of a person who's on this road, and who was fortunate enough to be asked to share today. For anybody who may have listened to this, I really appreciate you, and I would love to grow with you. You know, I think that's also the really big one, and that's, I think, will be my ending point, is finding people who we can grow with. You know, and it's okay to. Exactly. Finding a tribe, you know, and it's okay. It's okay to outgrow people at certain points, you know. And just because maybe we outgrow somebody doesn't mean that we don't still want the best for them, but we also can't hinder ourselves. And so finding those spaces that are most conducive to our own growth, healing, and ultimately to us being our greatest selves, you know, to us really being the power that we were meant to be. It takes that work, you know, that shedding and that adding, you know. And so, you know, I hope that somebody was able to take something away from this. And yeah, just really blessed to be here.
Yeah, man. If there's anything I know in the core of my being, it's that any voice that tells you you don't deserve to be in a loving community that supports and holds you up to be the best, most loving, most expressive version of yourself, anything that says that you don't deserve that is irrelevant and untrue. And we have to learn to unpack that, because we all deserve to be held in a loving space, in a loving community, by folks that want, you know, nothing but the best for us. Tomas, how can folks find you if they want to get in touch? If, you know, they want to reach out and say, I really was resonating with what you were talking about on Our New Voice. How can folks reach out and get in touch with you?
For sure. I think the best way might be on social media. Find me on Instagram at yo.soy.tomas, yo.soy.tomas. Trying to start using social media. I've been trying to use social media as a good healing platform. And if you don't use social media and you've made it this far and you truly want to reach out to me, just hit me up on my cell phone, 857-719-5200. I would love to hear from anybody and everybody, so don't even hesitate.
Even the federal agents listening, we'll send them a big heart hug, and I hope their souls may be salvaged.
They got to heal too, you know what I mean? Federales probably crying listening to this, trying to embrace themselves.
Well, Tomas, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all that is for walking with us on these healing journeys. And blessings.
Big blessings.
Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da da da. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do do do. May we listen for that sweet spot with all our heart.